All right, welcome to task F of the CFI FOI. This will be the last video. Just a reminder, we got the ACS on the left side over here, and then here's my breakdown on the right side. If you go up to the top, right here, it'll say the evaluator must select task E, task F, and at least one other task for initial flight instructor applicants. So what that means is your your DPE is going to ask you stuff about task E and task F. So those are the mandatory ones. That's why this one and my last video, task E, are going to be so important to go over. Just make sure you know everything in task E, task F, because they could ask you any of it. And then obviously they'll ask you the rest. There's at least one other task, but they'll pretty much go through most of it. So here we have task F, and we'll go back down. All right, task F is elements of effective teaching that include risk management and accident prevention. So this one's all about risk. This one's going to be all about risk. And the first thing, just a reminder, so I go through the entire ACS, all of these knowledge pieces here. So first is going to be teaching risk identification, assessment, and mitigation. I don't have that one in here exactly like I do the rest of these, because we'll just go over them as we go. We'll go over risk identification, we'll go over assessment, we'll go over mitigation. And then we have teaching risk management tools. That'll be down here. But first, I want to go over some of the definitions that are associated, even though they're not in here. Just make sure we know what they are. First, we have hazard, any condition that could foreseeably cause or contribute to an aircraft accident, and that's the FAA definition. We all know what a hazard is, anything that could cause something to go wrong. And then we should all know hazardous attitudes. I like to use the I'm Air acronym. The way I remember that is it kind of associates with macho, like I'm air, you think you're very macho. So we'll just go through these real quick. Impulsivity is do it quickly. And then over here I have the antidotes. So slow down, think first. And then we have macho, I can do it. Classic pilot, kind of cocky, I can do whatever I want. And then antidote is taking chances is foolish, slow down, think about what you're doing before you do it. Anti-authority, don't tell me what to do. Antidote is follow the rules and listen to others. Invulnerability, it won't happen to me. Antidote, it could happen to me. Resignation, what's the use? Antidote, I can make a difference. You should know all of those from private, but just want to put those in here. And then what is a risk? So the probability that a hazard occurs, or the probability and the possible severity of an accident or loss from exposure to various hazards, including injury to people and loss of resources. And then the types of risk we have, I use the UU rate acronym, just only way you could really put that into words. So the types of risk, the unidentified is going to be the first type. So risks not yet found by the pilot. Unacceptable, risks that cannot be allowed. Residual are risks remaining after all safety efforts have been employed. Acceptable, risks that can be tolerated and allowed to persist. That'll be smaller things. Identified risks are risks identified by the pilot. And then total are just the sum of the identified and unidentified risks. So that'll be, and we'll go through it soon, but just going through your checklist, see all of the risks you have to deal with, and then in your mind, how do those stack up? Here we have the risk assessment matrix. It should be, I put some links in here too that go straight to the FAA website. So this is exactly where I got the matrix right here. So if it's, you go, here's the y-axis, here's the x-axis, just connect those two. If it's in the green, you're fine. White, you're fine. But once you get in that yellow or red, that's whenever you want to start to avoid that flight or that risk. Try to get rid of that risk as soon as possible. So if it's unlikely, it's down here, and it's not very severe, it's going to be down here. If it's very likely and very severe, then it's going to be here. That's going to be like not having, like you're flying with very low fuel, so high severity, and you know it's pretty likely that you're going to run out of fuel. Like that's going to be catastrophic. I don't know why you would do that, but that would be up there. So there's a link to that. Kind of blurry. I wanted to put the link. Okay, and then here are the teaching risk management tools. That'll be our first one here. First, we have PAVE. We should all know this one. It's going to be your personal checklist. You should do it for every single flight, whether you write it down or it's a mental thing. But P is for pilot. So how am I feeling? Did I go through my I'm safe checklist? I think I go through it at the end, but illness, medication, stress, alcohol, fatigue, eating, and emotion is the last E. Just making sure that I'm ready for this flight. And then you have to go through the aircraft checklist. So airworthiness, aviate, sparrow, all those docs, you guys already know what those are, but making sure the aircraft is ready for flight. And are you comfortable with the flight? So maybe all these things check out, but you know, it's an experimental that you've never flown before. So you're not quite comfortable with that aircraft. That's another thing you can think about. Environment, that's just going to be weather, flight planning, stuff like that. External pressures is just pressures you're getting from other people, as well as all of the risks that are stacked up. That will include like all three of these combined is going to be your external pressures, plus it can be other things, other people. That'll be the first one. And here we have our FRATs checklist, FRAT tool, which is Flight Risk Assessment Tool. And here I put a link. This is the one the FAA recommended from the FAA website. So it's just going to have, it's just like your personal minimums combined with what you have for that specific flight. So you can go through this, you know, before, if I have a big cross country, I could go through and it'll kind of go through your PAVE checklist for you, but it's a little more extensive than that. So it'll be, you know, just for example, like I'm flying at night, true. And then you can go through all of these and it'll give you this risk total. So if I have a precision approach and the ceilings are less than 1,000, that risk is going to go up the more difficult I make this. And then there it got into the yellow. There I'm landing on a now it's moderate. And then it's like, you'll get this number and maybe, you know, you'll decide it gets in the red. Maybe I don't do that flight, or maybe I change something about my flight. So that's the flight risk assessment tool. When and how to introduce risk management. So this is all from the FAA website. And they said, start teaching risk management immediately. If you have a student working on their private, start with it immediately. And then they said, use the 3 P's model, which is going to be perform, perceive, process, and just doing that over and over and over, using ADM. That's your ADM checklist. And then this is just a quote. I'll read it real quick for you if you're just listening to this. It is never too early to start teaching risk management. Using the 3P model gives flight instructors a tool to start to teach them a structured, efficient, and systematic way to identify hazards, access risk, and implement effective risk controls. Practicing risk management needs to be as automatic in general aviation flying as basic aircraft control. Consider making the 3P discussion a standard feature of the flight discussion, as is true for other flying skills. Risk management habits are best developed through repetition and consistent adherence to specific procedures, which is so true. You want to be doing this every single flight, not just you're getting ready for your check ride. Oh, you better have these habits done. It's like, well, if you were doing it every single flight, every single pre-flight, you did a thorough pre-flight, you did a FRAT check every single flight, it's gonna be muscle memory. It's gonna be easy. Risk management teaching techniques by phase of instruction. This was a little confusing because I was like, what are the different types of phases? I found it on the FAA, on an FAA source. So it's going to be the Aviation Instructor's Handbook. So it'll be at the private level. So right here. And then it'll go down just the same way I did. I just put all of this information and broke it down into here. So this is straight from the FAA document from the Aviation Instructor's Handbook. So there are two different levels. There's going to be private level students. I'll try and go through this as quickly as possible, but you have your pre-solo. So part of every pre-flight and post-flight brief, you should be teaching risk management. Learners should be introduced to the FRATS checklist and demonstrated by the instructor. So I'll do it all first. By the first solo, the learner should be able to conduct a basic risk management analysis. And then post-solo, learner is able to perform a risk analysis by flight with occasional coaching from the instructor. And then the instructor should review what they did. Learner should debrief the instructor on the risk management aspects of the flight. And then here we have their cross-country. Learner should master risk management techniques, complexity of flight in the terrain, route, everything like that. And then including for a private certificate, flights at night, flights in complex airspace or to familiar airports. And then instructors should ask the learner to accomplish a full risk analysis for every dual in solo cross country, have them do the FRAT, have them do that risk matrix every single time, you know, like after looking through the whole flight. Maybe you give them scenarios based on the information I gave you based on this flight. Where would you put us in that matrix? And then here's our advanced level. So beyond private, here they had instrument. So risk management training is vital for instrument because of the potential hazards that come with flying in IMC. So you can't see outside. A lot more risks with that. Flying IFR is a little more technical. So you want to make sure you're going over the different risks, especially if they're going from private to instrument. They're not going to know the same risks. Two completely different ways of flying. And instructors should emphasize broad management techniques that will allow a pilot to analyze and evaluate complex weather. An instructor might suggest risk management aspects of flight in single engine, over terrain, or a multi-engine with single engine performance if you're flying over like mountains, and then aircraft with a single alternator, single radio, anything where if something fails, it can completely throw off your flight plan. Night conditions, low IMC, icing, everything associated with instrument. And then transition training. So anytime you're moving from one airplane that you're comfortable with to another, so single engine to multi-engine, or like like a smaller aircraft to a high performance aircraft, although similar, like what are the differences? So pilots transitioning to more advanced aircraft, like more advanced avionics, will encounter additional types of risks, more complex systems, avionics. So what are the risks associated with that? Pilots transitioning to lighter, slower aircraft will encounter additional risks because they don't have that performance that they did in the faster aircraft. Instructors should ensure that they have familiarity with the aircraft. How am I supposed to teach them risk if I don't even know the aircraft myself? So make sure I know the aircraft. Employ scenarios. If you're flying into like different national airspace systems that you're not used to. Other other SRM skills such as automation management, task and workload management. So you're flying by yourself. How do you manage that? In most instances, the pilot seeking training will be instrument rated, which may be true. Maybe they're working on their instrument. But how do you manage that when you're on your own? When you are on your own. And then we have recurrent training, flight reviews, and proficiency checks. So instructors should particularly emphasize risk management during any kind of recurrent training or proficiency events. Many pilots, okay, so this one is if you're doing a flight review and you're with like an older pilot and maybe they got their check ride done before the ACS was updated, or they got all their licenses 30 years ago, they're going to have different training than we are doing now. So make sure we're updating them on the new ACS, the new way we're supposed to do things, maybe show them what FRATS is, because they might not know what FRATS is, or the matrix. And then the scenario should be constructed in a way that mirrors the pilot's typical operating profile. So, this one, here's an example, a pilot that's usually just in class E, kind of your 61 cowboy wants to go to class B or class C, and they need these, like maybe ask them, like what are the minimums flying into class B, and then are you allowed to fly into class B, stuff like that. Operational training, pilots who are already certified conduct most of their flights without an instructor present. As an instructor, you should encourage them to practice effective risk management on all of their flights, which is absolutely true. It's when you start to get away from your flight training and you're flying on your own, when you start to lose those habits, those safe tendencies, because, like if you're just pulling your plane out of your hangar, going up to fly by yourself, it's like there's no one overseeing you. So it's like, why would I do a complete pre-flight or self evaluation? It just sounds like obvious, like why would I need to do that? But make sure you're still going through those things. Make sure you're pushing that your student is still going through those things no matter what, because the pilots who tend to have accidents, unfortunately, are the guys who avoid doing those things, like I don't know, not checking your oil. Or I heard a couple years ago there was this guy who didn't take out the yoke safety pin, and couldn't. I don't know how you do that, because you're supposed to do your flight control check, but he wasn't able to pull back because the pin got it stuck, and that's how he crashed and died. So just stuff like that, just not going through your pre-flight, not going through all your checklists. So pushing all of that. A key objective for instructors is to provide risk management guidance that will allow pilots to think of risk management intuitively as a part of the preparation for every flight and continuously while the flight progresses. Okay, so that's it for risk management teaching techniques by phase of instruction. That part was a little long, a little obvious, I think, but that goes over every part of it, so at least that's in there if they ask you about that. Now we have managing risk during flight instruction, including common flight instruction risks. So they have a link in here as well. Yeah. So common flight instruction risks. Right here. And that'll go, the way they go through it is exactly how I put it in ours, but for common flight instruction risks, they go through the PAVE checklist. So I just broke this down. So the pilot includes instructor and student. Student will make mistakes and instructor needs to be prepared. So it's not just the student now, it is both of us. It's not just me. Now you have the student. Aircraft, only fly a plane that is airworthy, legal to fly, and I have full confidence in the safety of flight. And environment, weather is appropriate for what we need to do. You know, the practice area is clear for maneuvers. NOTAMs are checked before every flight. And external, no flight is more important than having a safe flight. So going through my I'm safe checklist, I'm air checklist. And same for like you're letting your students solo. Maybe they were really trying to push you to solo. It's like, am I comfortable, or are they having like kind of a macho hazardous attitude? You know, maybe like don't let their overconfidence persuade you to push them past the limit that you don't feel like they're at. So if they're like, come on, I'm ready for my solo, but it's like last time you flew, we were doing landings and you bounced like 3 times, you weren't really on center line. So it's like, make sure you're checking all those things. Make sure you are very comfortable with where they're at. And then same thing here, best practices for managing risk during flight instruction. They go through the PAVE checklist here. So pilot instructor qualifications are paramount in mitigating currency and proficiency issues. Should be familiar with aircraft models and avionics before instructing. Obviously, can't push this enough. You got to be comfortable. You got to be very knowledgeable, not just like, I don't want to fly a plane 1 or 2 times. I'm like, okay, you know, like I want to really know that aircraft, because it's going to be hard for me to teach whenever I'm also not comfortable, and the student can feel that uncomfortable energy whenever, you know, you're over there, you're not too sure, or something's making you nervous. It's like, you got to be fully comfortable in that aircraft, know everything about it. That also goes for aircraft. Make sure it's airworthy, same thing. Going through your pre-flight environment, again, weather. One of the biggest reasons for accidents is weather, you know, flying into clouds, and then you got CFIT, controlled flight into terrain, things like that. External instructors should ease learner concerns about schedule conflicts with events in their professional and personal lives. Instructors should be conscious of each learner's schedule limitations and other external factors that could affect their performance. So this is why I find it really important to get to know your student on a personal level, like if it's someone who's working full time and they just got off a 10-hour shift and they drove straight to the airport and now you have to go fly a 1.4, you got to go solo them. It's like, make sure you're just looking at those things, because if or the classic scenario, like some guy just got a divorce and now he wants to go get his private and he just wants to start flying because his wife never let him, something like that. It's like, maybe just keep an eye on that, because that could come with a lot of risks. So we went over A and B, and now we have C. Special considerations while taking off and landing, while teaching takeoffs and landings. Oh, one sec, sorry. So we have takeoffs. These are a little long. I tried to trim them down a little bit, but the instructor should conduct the majority of their teaching, airspeeds, pitch, attitude, visual references, flight control inputs, engine parameters prior to contacting tower or announcing their intentions on the CTAF at a non-towered airport. This will avoid overstimulating the learner's senses, helping maintain a sterile flight deck, and support situational awareness and collision avoidance. I think this one's huge. At least for me, it was really hard because I always thought my instructors would, we would just get in the plane, get the engine running, they're trying to time build, but then it's like they're like teaching me in the moment, which makes it really hard to take in everything all at once. So like I'm going into a class C, a class Charlie, and I gotta talk to tower and he's teaching me how to land, but I'm also kind of worried, are we going onto the right runway? It's like, if you just do it on the ground, teach them everything first, and then just break it up so they can slow down, make sure you have a safe flight, make sure you're not so indulged in what you're trying to teach that you're not safe. So like you're not avoiding other aircraft and you're listening to tower, or you're in a class echo and there's other traffic. So that's basically all for that one. Giving them scenarios for what you're gonna do first, and then landings. Many complex decisions are made during the landing phase. Novice student pilots have little experience to rely on. Instructors sometimes fall prey to teaching landings mechanically instead of, they just give them like power control configuration. So instead, it's necessary to convey problems and solutions based on what is actually happening on that specific approach. The instructor should prompt the learner on the current conditions and how to correct the situation to maintain a stabilized approach. So yeah, here it's on the ground, or maybe, you're flying from the practice area to the pattern. Give them all of this information now. So then whenever you're in the pattern and you're on final and it's like, oh, maybe the winds are really pushing you from the left and it's mostly a crosswind. It's like, I don't want to be giving them all this information now. Like, just give them all of that, all of the basic stuff like pitch for airspeed, power for altitude, give them that on the way there. And then once you're in the pattern and you're coming in on final, you can be like, okay, so here you want to use your rudder to square up, using your ailerons, using your yoke to move left and right, keep you on center line, and then just small corrections after that. That way they can slow it. It just slows it down for them a bunch. That's it for that one. And the last one, we have aeronautical decision making. You should know what this is already, but that'll be that 3 Ps like we went through before, but a systematic approach to mental process used by pilots to consistently determine the best course of action in response to a given set of circumstances. It is what a pilot intends to do based on the latest information he or she has. And that's straight from the FAA. So just what risks, what information do I have? What am I tasked with right now, and what is the best way to deal with it? That's all that ADM is, and we're constantly using that on the ground even before the flight. Crew resource management, CRM. So the effective use of all available resources for flight crew personnel to assure a safe and efficient operation, reducing error, avoiding stress, and increasing efficiency. So this one can be a balance because, let's say you're just in like a Cessna 172, and instead of flying all by myself, I'm flying with someone who's at the same level as me. And it's like, okay, now we have to assess who has the flight controls, who's gonna control the GPS, who's gonna make all the radio comms. It's nice to have one person doing one thing. That way there's no back and forth or confusion. And your controls, my controls, your controls, positive exchange of controls. So managing a crew, and I mean, once you get to bigger aircraft, you'll be doing this every time. So that's an important thing to get used to, working with others. And lastly, we have single pilot resource management, SRM. So the art of managing all onboard and outside resources available to a pilot before and during a flight to help ensure a safe and successful outcome. Incorporating SRM into GA pilot training is an important step forward in aviation safety. A structured approach to SRM helps pilots learn to gather information, analyze it, and make sound decisions on the conduct of flight. So this one is what we're all pretty used to. You're flying by yourself, you're working on your commercial, you got to do your solo cross countries. In some ways it's easier, in some ways it's harder than flying with others. It's like everything is up to me, so that part can be nice, but then also you get into a high stress situation and it'd be nice to have someone else. You're coming into tower and it'd be nice to have someone just throw in ground for you, and you're trying to figure out your taxi out. So little stuff like that. So managing, I got to do this all on my own. How do I manage that? And that is it for task F, and that is it for the CFI FOI. I went in and I got the link for you guys, so it should be in all of my videos. It should just bring you to this, and if there's anything wrong with that, let me know in the comments. But yeah, that's it for CFI. Thank you for watching, or CFI FOI. Thanks for tuning into these, and let me know if you guys have any questions, or if you want me to go over something else. But for now, that's it. Thank you.